First, I will give you the synopsis of the story, The Cask of Amontillado. The Cask of Amontillado is the story of a man named Montisor who decides to seek revenge against a man named Fortunato, who has insulted him. He meets Fortunato at the carnival, lures him into the catacombs of his home, and buries him alive. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Montisor begins by telling us about his friend Fortunato, who had injured him many times over the course of their friendship, but had now insulted him. Montisor vowed revenge, but didn't make a verbal threat, just secretly plotted. He describes the delicate balance of how to redress a wrong and making sure the wrongdoer knows what he has done but not becoming obsessed. Montisor assures that Fortunato had no idea of this plot because he continued to be friendly in his face. Fortunato was a wine conner. It was in the drunken state that Fortunato appeared to address in a fancy costumes of a striped dress with bells during the carnival season. Montisor is very excited to see him and tells him about the predicament he was with some Amontillado wine, for which he has paid the price of a special vintage and is now unsure of its authenticity. He compliments Fortunato on his knowledge and says he was silly to buy the wine without his advice. Fortunato doesn't the carnival season. He seems to be in a frenzy anyway and now repeats the name Amontillado over and over. Montisor tells him not to worry, that he is going to visit another expert, Lucchesi, and he can tell that Fortunato is busy. Fortunato scoffs at Lucchesi's knowledge and responds that he himself is busy. He insists they go to Montisor vault right away to see the wine. Montisor now changes his excuse and says that Fortunato obviously is not well and must not venture into a damp, nitrate-covered wine storage vaults. Fortunato won't hear of it and takes Montisor by the arm, covering him with his strange cloak. They arrive at Montisor's house, which is empty of servants, as Montisor had expected. He had told him to stay in the house, but he had said that he would not return till morning. So he knew that they would have broken their words as soon as he left. He fetches 2 torches from the walls, goes right down, through the level of the house to the vaults below. As they work towards the Amontillado, Fortunato begins to cough from a damp clinging to the walls. Montisor says they should go back as he doesn't want Fortunato to get sick, but Fortunato denies that his cough is serious and demands that they go on. Montisor suggests they drink some medocs to protect them from the element. Fortunato proposes a toast to the buried remains that surround him in the vaults, and Montisor proposes one of the Fortunato's long life. They journey farther and farther into the catacombs. Montisor explains that his ancestors, the Montisors, were a large, wealthy family. Fortunato asks what the family's grace was, and Montisor describes a fancy arrangement of a gold foot stamping a serpent who has bitten it, and the motto, Nimome impiones laquesit, which means, no one can harm me unpunished. Fortunato is pleased with this motto, and the wine is making him giddy again. It is affecting Montisor too. Montessor described the night trail is changing as they go farther in. They are now under the riverbed, and there are bones and remains all around them, dripping with nitrate. He suggests they take another drink. Fortunato empties the bottle and then left it in a strange symbolic gestures, which he explains is a form of brotherhood. The Masons. Montessor insists he is one of the Masons, and produces a trowel from under his cloak as his symbolic gestures. Fortunato is puzzled by this joke, but they continued on, deeper and deeper in search of Amontillado. They came to the entrance of a dark crypt. Inside the crypt is another enclosure, narrower, and the three of its walls lined with human remains, and the fourth walls exposed and its bones decorates thrown down before it is impaled. Through this entrance is yet another recess, which is completely dark, and Montessor says lead to the innermost vault, where the Amontillado is. Montessor mentions Lucchesi again, but Fortunato is determined to go ahead. He disappears with his torch into the recess and reaches the end, which is stopped with a rock. Quickly, Montessor grabs him and chain and lock him to the stone wall. He again draws Fortunato's attention to the nitrate and tells him to go back, but Fortunato is obviously stuck now and responds in his frenzied voice with Amontillado. Montessor now goes to the pile of bone and digs about until he finds some building materials hidden there, and he starts to build a wall blocking in a recess. As he goes, Fortunato begins to make sorrowful noise. Montessor knows that the man is no longer drunk. He builds rows after rows of bricks until the 7 rows are in place. Now, in the dim glow, he can hardly see his captive. Fortunato begins to scream horribly. Suddenly, worried Fortunato will be able to pull himself free. Montessor checked the recess with his sword, but the strength of the stony walls satisfied him. He joined Fortunatus in screaming, mockingly echoing his terror, until Fortunato falls silent. At midnight, Montessor has almost finished the wall. There is just one brick to place, but as he begins to slide it into position, Fortunato emits a low laugh, then speaks in a sad voice, complimenting Montessor on a very impressive joke, but asks when he will be let out, because people are waiting for him. Montessor repeats Fortunato's phrases without answering these questions, but when Fortunato again falls silent, Montessor calls out his name, Fortunato, Fortunato. Montessor is disappointed when Fortunato does not respond. Now feeling ill from a dump, Montessor drops his torch into the recess and places the final stone to close the wall. He then put the pile of bones in front of the new wall. It is now half a century later, he tells us, and they have not been touched. He ends his story by saying, "Rest in peace," in Latin. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe.